Finding a great story can be compared to hunting for buried treasure, but what if the treasure that you seek the most is actually buried within you? Riches just waiting to be unearthed that have been there all along. Precious story gems ready to be polished and shared in such a way that it actually makes people sit up and take notice. Well, grab a shovel. We're going digging for story gold on today's edition of the Reinvention Chronicles. Digging for story gold, and this ties into the phone call that I get now almost every week from someone. It could be in the automotive business, the insurance industry, the recycling sector. Had one the other day from a tech startup that's still fresh in my mind. And the question always comes back to essentially the same issue and idea, that being, what is our story? What could we possibly tell in terms of a story that would greatly set us apart from anyone in our competition, anyone in our category, and greatly accelerate the growth of our business or personal brand? And the question also devolves into not only what is our story, but do we even have a story worth sharing? Because one thing I've observed is that unless people think they've done something absolutely stupendous or miraculous, like climb Everest, win Olympic gold, or find a cure for cancer, end poverty in the third world, they just don't think, and maybe you feel this too, that we have a story worth telling or sharing. And nothing, I repeat, nothing could be further from the truth. Everyone's got a story. Somewhere, if you dig deep enough, you will find stories that relate to timeless universal human values that were reflected in those events. So it could be a story about integrity, could be a story about ethics or values. It could be a story about persistence. It could be a story about fundamental unfairness. This gal was telling me a story the other day. I was riveted by the fundamental unfairness of what happened before she immigrated to Canada. And so consequently, I think what happens is that we don't tend to pause, reflect long enough in terms of things that have happened to us, in terms of those business or life-changing moments that could potentially somehow be explored at a deeper level to figure out what is the real story that unfolded and what were the lessons learned. Because so many people, I think what happens is they lose sight not only of the potential of their story, but they also get themselves all wrapped up in a bunch of nonsense and rigmarole in terms of fearing how they're going to be judged or what other people might think. And geez, that's not speaking a very professional language. And nothing, I repeat, nothing could be further from not only the truth, but also it takes the eye off the ball, so to speak. Let's not lose focus of what we're trying to do here. And that brings back to mind, for me, my 6 favorite words of 2015 in terms of realigning, reshaping, strategic direction. Why are we digging for story gold in the first place? And it ties to those 6 magic words, in my opinion. What are we trying to accomplish? Absolutely fundamental question. What are we trying to accomplish here? I mean, why go digging for story gold in the first place? 2 reasons, actually: differentiation and authenticity. And what happens is a lot of people, and maybe you've seen this happen for yourself, a lot of people hide behind what I call category language when it comes to their marketing communication. Well over 90% of any category language is dominated by the talk of the actual product or service, the features, advantages, benefits, the low prices, the on-time deliveries. What was the one I had the other day? Let's see, we're going to help our clients build the most diverse and productive workforce by being the most dynamic, innovative, knowledgeable, and authentic solution provider in our industry. But category language is nothing more, nothing less than a mask. And it's a mask that does nothing to achieve the objectives of differentiation and authenticity. And stop and think yourself, why is this so important? Because You don't want to be perceived as just another interchangeable commodity. And when you really stop and think about it, I mean, how can we expect to attract any attention in the market if we don't have a story that's worth paying attention to? And I know from my own personal experience, when I wanted to explore the subject of reinvention and explore it at a much deeper level, way beyond just the subject area of brand, I had to do the same thing. I had to look within to find some of those life-changing or business-changing moments where my timeless universal human values were being unearthed, as it were. And so consequently, it took a while. But eventually, I found that story, and it's right there on the homepage of my website, the story that captured, I thought, the essence of what reinvention is, why I'm fascinated by the subject, and why I think so many other people are gravitating towards this subject as well. So, you know, from personal experience, you want to explore stories that you might not have thought maybe you thought they just didn't have that much significance, but as it turns out, they actually do. And now, let's talk in very practical terms about some solutions for you to consider. So here's something to think about, a potential solution to consider, and I think it's twofold. I think it starts, first of all, in your own mind. It starts with the decision to reframe the entire question when it comes to digging for story gold. It starts with the decision not to conform, not to speak the language of the category, and instead embrace the idea of telling a story, your own personal story that you're connected to in some way. So, because never lose sight, since the beginning of mankind, people have relished a great story. People, you know, it's been said, facts tell, but stories sell. And a glaring moment for me, an eye-opening moment, was when we were having lunch one day with friends of ours out in Western Canada. Mike and Robbie are telling us about going to see this speaker in Chicago and how he told this incredible story about going to South America to compete in the Amazing Race, and he discovered these villages where all these kids went without shoes, and if they didn't have shoes, they couldn't go to school. And that's the story of how Blake Mycoskie founded Tom's Shoes. And if you want a shining example, knowing that it begins with a mindset not to speak category language, because let's face it, shoes are just another interchangeable commodity when it gets right down to it, but instead, Blake Mycoskie serves as someone you can look to who has actually embraced storytelling and used it in a most effective manner, not only to build his business, but impact nations all over the world.
One of the things that frustrates me is when I meet people now and they think that Tom's has always been this big company and movement, and they assume that they could never do something like this. And I'm very quick to remind them that I had no experience in shoes, no experience in retail. I only had $5,000 in investment capital initially, and this is the result. It was because it was a big idea and we went for it. Simplicity has been a theme of my life. I mean, I live on a sailboat, I don't have a lot of stuff, I don't like to have my desk very cluttered, and I specifically feel in business models, simplicity wins. The thing about simplicity that people get tripped up on is when they're starting something, they feel a little insecure, so they want to add all these bells and whistles and product features. And instead, if they just get down to what is the one thing I'm trying to say or do or sell, people will understand it better, so therefore they can share it better, and that's ultimately going to lead to that kind of viral effect that all founders are looking for.
So when it comes to implementation, let's start with baby steps. Write down only three life-changing or business-changing moments. The day when your world blew up or galaxies collided, and after the smoke cleared and the dust settled, you were left with some very valuable insights about yourself or the way the world works. Or, I mean, we're talking about those days when there was a definite turning point, a day when there was clear and present danger, there were villains, there were obstacles, but more importantly, there were life lessons, things you learned about yourself or the way the world works. Or in the case of Blake Mycoskie, you saw a wrong that had to be righted. But the point is this: those are the things that we're interested in to hear from you. Those are the things, not your products and services, your features, advantages, benefits. Those are the stories that will shine a light in terms of why you do what it is you do. And if you can find a way to tell those stories, and maybe with a lyrical tip of the cap to Neil Young, you know, you want to live, you want to give, you want to be a miner for a story with a heart of gold. And in that way, you too can find ways to search within to find that story worth sharing to the outside world. Until next time, continue the quest and recreate and reimaginate the business, the brand, the life, the career that you deserve.